I
Great.
love when you get this excited about a technology. This is one of those things that lights up both of our brains with our different um, perspectives, which
Yeah,
is a really interesting approach to treating vaginal infections. So,
absolutely.
I mean, for you, you've been treating these infections for decades, but you were so excited about this. What is exciting you that's so unique about what
Yeah.
their solution is?
Well, look, first of all, recurrent and chronic vaginitis is literally the bane of many gynecologists' existence, and certainly the bane of so many patients' existence. These are incredibly uncomfortable, disruptive, they interfere with quality of life. And in fact, BV, bacterial vaginosis, is probably the most common infection ever worldwide in the vaginal health space. So to me, this is incredibly exciting to have some sort of a topical light-based therapy that either can be used with antibiotic treatment or instead of, perhaps, based on clinical trials. And with all of the antibiotic resistance out, it would be amazing to have another alternative that doesn't have to overcome that burden.
And they will have all kinds of expressions, including one that's on their website already, shine a light on intimate health. There's so much that can be done from a marketing communication perspective. So people have a sense of this. Does a day go by in your practice where you don't see someone with one of these infections?
The truth, the truth, Rachel, is no, a day does not go by where I'm not getting at least a couple of phone calls or physically seeing somebody who's dealing with infection, whether it's a first infection, a chronic infection that we're just having a lot of trouble controlling, or something that's recurring even on a very regular basis.
So take a listen to this exciting new approach where we speak with the founders of UVISA Health.
Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel Braun Sherrill. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
We are so excited to have our guest today, Ella Harris, who's the founder and CEO, and Dr. Sonal Pendharkar Kulkarni, who is the co-founder and chief scientific officer of UVISA. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks for having
you.
us. We're really excited to be here.
Yeah, wonderful to have you both. I have to say, I stumbled on Uvisa quite by accident during an interview of a previous guest on Business of the V, and I literally found myself going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole about your product and the mission at hand. So please let our audience know about Uvisa, your product that's hopefully coming to market soon, sooner than later, and what it's really meant to solve.
I would love you to start. I would love to just point out that on your website, I love the headline, Shining a Light on the Intimate Health of Women. So, with that as a lead in, tell us about Uvisa and what the catalyst, the spark was to create this.
Sure. So I can take that. So UVISA actually started when I was taking my master's degree in technology entrepreneurship at the Danish Technical University. And I did that a little bit later in life. So I was in my early 30s and I just had my first baby. And I was sat there in this lecture theatre being presented with this piece of research and which I would then later be asked to find a business case for. And there was this professor, this esteemed professor of photonics, standing in front of these 200 students in this lecture theatre, presenting that he had been working on a concept of facilitating antibiotic treatment with UV light to hopefully reduce the number of antibiotics needed to treat infections. And he'd been working with microbiologists from Copenhagen University, and they'd found that actually UV light on its own was capable of destroying bacteria in a biofilm state. And so there's me sitting in this lecture theatre. I'm 10 months postpartum after having my first baby. And for women that have gone through that experience, you'll know there's a whole heap of changes that happen to your body, and you're very aware of what's going on in your vagina and lots of other places during that time. I was one of the unlucky ones that during my pregnancy had horrible yeast infections. And so I sat there and he said, so we can bring the healing power of sunlight to parts of the body that don't see the sun, like the mouth. Of course he did, right? Because he wasn't thinking about anywhere else. And so I raised my hand and I said, could this have implications in women's health or gynecological health? And after clarifying the question a couple of times, you could see the penny drop and the color drain from his face. And he very flusteredly said, oh, yes, yes, maybe it could. And so that was the start of UVISA, with this concept that UV light could destroy bacteria in a biofilm, thus treating infections, and thus be a viable treatment option for parts of the body that don't typically see sunlight,
So
like the
is
vagina.
this okay, so funny story. I was exiting my gym before I met you and you both, and there was a machine that was a UV light machine that you could put your phone in to disinfect it on your way out of the gym. And of course, you feel like you've definitely hit a lot of germs when you're in the gym. And again, that really sparked my curiosity here. What I wonder though is how do we know, like maybe you can just explain the mechanism behind the light. How do we know that it is actually killing the bad stuff, but leaving the good bacteria behind intact? How do we know that?
So it's a small device which has an insertable part that you insert in the vagina, and there is a part that sits outside on the vulva. And what it does is it delivers the therapeutic light, and by that, what we mean is that specific wavelengths of light that have the capability of exciting the photosensitizer molecules within these pathogenic microbes, yeast and in bacteria, Gardnerella vaginalis, which is in the center here. And it does not affect as much as it does to these pathogenic microbes, the lactobacillus. So what we are able to achieve with this therapeutic wavelength of light is specifically targeting the symptom-causing microbes, while we can preserve more the good lactobacillus. So that is how we target them, but we also are able to preserve the good lactobacillus we need.
And is this meant for actual treatment, or is it an adjunctive treatment or part of a treatment plan along with antibiotics? And I really ask this because the emergence of so many resistant antibiotic strains of bacteria and, of course, antifungals are dealing with the same problem with yeast. Is this meant to be actual treatment or adjunctive along with antibiotics or in place of?
So light on its own can target these microbes independently without the need or without being an adjuvant to a treatment. What we are trying to achieve here is not use light all alone. We're using light, yes, but we're not targeting complete killing. We're just trying to modulate and optimize the microbiome, just reduce the proportion of these pathogenic species enough so that the good lactobacillus, they have the chance to repopulate and rebalance the microbiome.
I was just going to jump in and just add to that while we are still scientifically and clinically validating the exact treatment regime, but we are targeting treatment so that it can be a replacement for those antimicrobial medications.
And based on what you described, and again, you're all deep into this and are deep into the science and the medicine. Based on what you described, is it possible that at some point it could be a preventative solution?
That is a
Yes.
potential, yeah. So light, we're really at the early discovery phase of this as a therapeutic option. Light's used already in dermatology and in other areas, but in this area, it's kind of new. So we're still exploring the avenues, but yes, because it has this rebalancing effect, it could be used to just keep those pathogenic microbes just at bay. And obviously, potentially in combination with things that support regrowth of good bacteria, probiotics or, nutritional lifestyle changes, etc. We do think that it could have a preventative effect, but we haven't validated that yet.
Right.
So.
So here's today's hot flash. There are numerous different wavelengths of light used in the medical world. UV light specifically is incredibly interesting in women's health because it has strong antibacterial properties.
I'm thinking that people who are listening who are struggling with chronic infections are thinking, when could I get my hands on this? So I have so many questions about the user experience. But the first one is, how far away are you? And I know there's no guarantee. What is the regulatory path that you need to go through? Um, when do you roughly expect it or hope that it'll be in market? And then my third question is, in terms of how you use this, do you wear it for a minute? Do you wear it for 10 minutes? Are you still figuring out, if you will, the dosing? I'm just so curious about all these things because if you have this, as you said, Ella, if you've experienced an infection, you know the urgency of handling it.
Exactly. And so that's why this device is a home-based treatment that you'll be able to access, purchase once, clean, recharge, reuse again and again for as many times as you need. The treatment itself is 30 minutes. So you insert it, it's 30 minutes, it's connected to a digital interface. So you are fully aware of what's going on during that 30 minutes. It's super comfortable. So during that 30 minutes, women are getting dressed, they're moving around, they're carrying on with their business. They don't even notice it's there. And then you take it out, you clean it, and like I say, you wash it and you save it for next time. The treatment regime will likely be dependent on the severity of your infection and symptoms. We're seeing some women respond just after a single session of 30 minutes, and some need two, maybe three or four sessions, but it's 30 minutes per day. So it may be 1 to 4 days or 5 days of treatment, depending on your own experiences.
Yeah,
Um,
the issue with recurrent infection is a big
Mhm.
one, in addition to what Rachel mentioned, which is chronic infection. So these are two different things, really. But newer things in the medical literature suggest that partner treatment, particularly male
Mhm.
partner treatment, is helpful and beneficial to help prevent recurrent infection, particularly for BV. Is there a place for this device as it comes to a male partner, if that's appropriate for somebody who wants to use this?
It's a very interesting angle and perspective because, of course, in case of recurrent infections, that is what happens. The microbes get transferred among between the partners, and so coming to the light and light as a treatment, there is an application that it can be also given to male partners, just as we would talk about antibiotics. And these are the different avenues where we could and we can take our technology in the coming future.
Yeah. I don't know how open to that they're going to be. But I just think male partners are currently being given antibiotics to help prevent recurrent
Precisely.
infection for their female partners. So it would be nice to be able to avoid resistance in that realm as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Precisely.
I don't want to be too crude here, but the women that are testing our device experience a pleasant heating sensation when they put it inside them. I can imagine that if you tell a guy that put your penis in this and it will, it'll just feel nice, they're probably gonna not hate it, right?
Very good, very good marketing tactic there. So you said this is an at-home device. What is the cost, or what do you imagine the cost would be? And I guess you can talk about the cost of the product, but also the cost of each treatment paradigm, because if people are going to get treated month after month or for many days in a row, and how would that compare to antibiotics? And would this be an insurance covered item or not,
We
in your
we
eyes?
li-
Yeah, I mean,
we pile it on. We get so excited.
I feel like I've not answered the full question on the when are we going to market yet.
Oh
So
yeah.
we're hoping to launch our first medical product in 2027. So it's not too far away now. We're just finishing those regulatory pathways. Um, yeah, so hopefully there. Pricing is still something that we're working on, but this is not going to be as cheap as an antibiotic treatment. So who we're targeting are those highly recurrent infection sufferers or those chronic infection sufferers that are already, taking time out of their day to go and see their doctor, um, paying for prescriptive medicine, maybe paying for supplements, paying for other remedies that they may be choosing. And we are comparable or cheaper in the long run because obviously ours is a reusable product. So pricing in the US will be between $200 and $300 per device. We are exploring the reimbursement pathway and hope to have that added to the model later. But initially, it will be direct to consumer, so women can just get their hands on it when they are willing to pay out of pocket, of course.
And when you talk about the launch, are you talking about multi-markets? Where are you starting? When would it be coming to the US?
That is a really, really great question. We are a Danish-based company, so we're based in Europe. We've been following the European regulatory pathway to build our initial technical file to get it approved here in Europe as a Class 2A medical device as per the European MDR. We are now also starting to explore the FDA pathway and figure out our timeline for that in the US. So I'm gonna not commit to a time if
Okay,
that's
but what
okay.
would be the regulatory pathway, the approval process for the FDA in terms of the category that you would fit into?
The medical product is a class 2 de novo pathway product.
Okay. So for people who are listening, de novo means this is new. There's not a predicate device. It means that approval often takes longer and requires um, new data that don't exist. So compare that to, let's say, if you come out with a new tampon, there are many, many tampons. If you've changed the structure, if you've changed the ingredients, if you will, the materials, that is not de novo. There is a predicate device, meaning the FDA, the regulatory body, has seen this before and believes the clinical data. So just for people, this is a big lift and important work, and good for you. How are you funding all of this work?
We're backed by some incredible angel investors at the moment. So we've raised about 2 million euros to date through angel investment and grants, public grants. We are just in the process of raising our seed round. We have really great momentum in that round. We have a lot of strong interest, but we do have a couple of tickets open. So we are also very keen to talk to potential people that want to jump in early when you're obviously getting maximum value out of that investment. So just throwing that out there into the podcast realm.
Totally fair game.
Absolutely.
We
Yeah.
appreciate that. And in terms of your strategy, I've spent a lot of time with investors, especially in this space. When you think about, or as you're having these discussions and positioning it, um, there's so many different ways you could talk about it. I just came from JP Morgan where we had these kind of discussions. It could be a women's health device. It could be an infection device. It could be a UV light treatment device. It could, there's so many different ways to think about it. How are you positioning it when you're having those conversations?
So the device is our first product, right? But that is not UVISA Health. UVISA Health is a holistic vaginal health company that is really trying to ensure that data gaps that are there are plugged so that longer term, the solutions that are being brought to market that are science-led and clinically validated are addressing, yeah, vaginal health as a whole, uh, which obviously embeds also in hormonal health and reproductive health and overall, I mean, there's links to gut health. There's a lot of potential here, but Uvisa Health is a aiming to become a global women's health provider that touches on a lot of these aspects. And
Yeah.
we are doing that by pioneering the first phototherapy or light-based treatment to address vaginal infections. But that's just the
Yeah.
first stepping stone as we see it.
As you can see, we get a little excited about these things. I'm just curious though, because I have seen UV devices for antimicrobial use before. Not sure why they wouldn't be predicate devices for the FDA, particularly in the menstrual cup world. And, even as simple as what I mentioned with cell phones, which are going in there. So just food for thought. My bigger question is about clinical trials because I'm sure you're testing this, but I just wonder how you orchestrate them. Uh, do you run randomized controlled, placebo-controlled trials? And if so, what is the other group being treated with? Is it just simple antibiotics? So how are you going to prove that this is effective with or without, better than or not as good as, but maybe to be used with traditional standard of care treatment?
As you're describing how the trials can and may happen, that is the actual way of conducting the trial to assess how does your treatment works in comparison to placebo, as well as in comparison to current standard of treatments. And that is the best way when you get the complete picture of where you can place your treatment compared to the other available options and treatments. In our case, we are still in the early phase, and so for us, the major question remained was does it work in humans? Because there's no precedence, there's no data, no clinical trial published before on use of these lights. And so this is what we have been looking into our clinical. But of course, going forward, if we want to compare and place ourselves next to the current standards, that's the comparative study we'll be aiming to do. Yeah.
We were curious how the two of you met and how what were you doing prior to this company and this mission that brought you to this together?
I started UVISA when I was in my early 30s, going and doing, I guess I was a mature student. That's how they call you, isn't it? If you're, not 18 anymore. So I was a mature student at university, and that's when I came up with the idea and started working on the early assessment of the business, like is it feasible? Is there any IP in the space? How many people suffer with this condition, et cetera, et cetera. The desk research that I could do. And I'd been doing that sort of for about a year and a half with some of my fellow students who were, you know, not mature students. They were right at the start of their careers and stuff. Prior to that, I had been working, so I trained as a forensic scientist in my early years, and then I didn't want to be in a lab, so I moved out of that. And I have worked in business development and product management for many, many years in various scientific companies, scientific software, and ed tech companies. So that was what I was doing. But then, yeah, about 18 months into that journey, I met Sonal, and she can tell you more about that.
Prior to UVISA, it was a different life, still in women's health, because that journey within women's health space for me started at Karolinska, where I did my PhD. And the doctoral research, it finalizing that part led me to understand the gap, and the disappointment set in that seeing that same research was happening across the continents in different population, but there was no solution, there was no service that translated that science into a real product that would help women. And so it started all then at that time, and this was back in 2013. Fast forward 2019, when I was in Switzerland, I had carved out the business plan, the perfect plan, but I did not have the informal education or know-how how to start a business, nor I had the relevant network. So I couldn't get it off the ground. But then 3.5 years back, when I was working with a different medical device startup in Copenhagen, I was very much immersed into the startup community. And so I thought, okay, this was a great place and great time to assess the business idea again. And this was about home-based vaginal microbiome test and screening. And common contact who knew Ella and that she had recently established UVISA and was gaining traction, and he knew about what they were on the mission, what their mission was, and likewise what I was on to. So I guess you two should meet because you really have a high overlap of what you want to achieve within women's health space. So that's how we met in the summer of 2022. And when we met, we had this very long discussion than what we had actually planned for. Straight into vaginal microbiome and all the questions, the discussions, what the research was looking at that time point, where I was coming from. And we realized that, okay, we really make a very strong team if we team up. And that's how it all started. And we started to look ways of how we can collaborate and, form a proper team full-time working in UVISA. And yeah, since then we have been together, building this together here.
I love this story. Yeah, no.
How long has this been a full-time venture for the two of you? because, you said 2013, and we always think that people believe you come up with an idea and, it's immediately in market. I mean, this is a commitment. It's a sacrifice. It takes discipline. So how many years were you thinking about it and tinkering with it before you jumped in full time?
It wasn't 2013, sorry. It was 2020. I
2013
started
was
my
just me.
so UVISA started in 2020 when I was doing my
Okay.
master's degree. So that's 5 years ago, I guess now.
Okay.
Almost 6 years ago when I first had the idea. And then I worked on it part-time through my master's degree, which was a 2-year master's program, until 2022. We met in 2022. Sonal had been doing her background research since 2013 on, vaginal
Thank you.
microbiome and stuff like that. And but we met in 2022, and we both went full time at the end of that year, start of 23. And so it has been a bit of a labor of love getting it off the ground. But since 2023, we've achieved just such a huge amount, because we really had to build the research from the ground up. So
Yeah.
we conducted all of the preclinical work, both efficacy and safety. We obviously had to design a product which we heavily involved real women in. So,
Hmm.
women have been involved in the actual design and the physical development of our product the whole way through. We've conducted masses of user research to gain understanding of, well, how prevalent is this problem really? Not just what the literature says, like in the real world, what's that dark number around this? So we've done massive user research, tons of product development, loads of preclinical work, which actually then allowed us to pivot straight into clinical, bypassing animal studies, which we're really, really proud of because it shows the strength of our preclinical work. So we've really achieved a lot because really we've only been working on this full time for 3 years.
2.5 years. Yeah, 3 years.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
people who are listening and can't wait to get their hands on this device, I know it's a little bit away. Where can they get more information? Are there openings to participate in upcoming clinical trials? Because I know if this speaks to you and will speak to millions of sufferers, where would they go if they want to know more and learn more and maybe even participate?
The best place right now is our website. So www.uvisahealth.com. That's our website. We're also obviously very active on LinkedIn, but they can contact us through the website anytime. We don't have any openings in the clinical studies at the moment. We've just wrapped up our first clinical study, so we've stopped recruitment for that. But we're always seeking input, particularly now as we're developing the digital aspect of the business. So we are going to want people to be testing the proprietary symptom checking algorithm that's contained in there. So yeah, please do drop us an email or
Absolutely.
slide into our DMs on LinkedIn.
Well, I, for one, signed up on the website to get updates. I'm super excited to see this come around, particularly with so many at-home self-testing, self-treatment paradigms that are really out there in the women's health space. I think this is super exciting. So thank you so much for joining us today. We can't wait to watch.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.